What's up, everybody, and welcome to the pre-lock show for Thursday night football to kick off the weekend of football. We're here. Kyle Murray's joining me today. We're going to talk about the Chiefs and the Broncos and answer all your questions, but I need for you to ask the questions, so get them in chat, wherever, drop them, and we'll answer them. We're going to take you up to lock. We got 33 minutes till this thing kicks off. We've got probably about 30-ish minutes till the baseball game starts. That's Phillies Braves. That's a nice one. We got a little college football on in the background. We're doing it on a Thursday, so let me bring in Kyle. And Kyle, how are you doing on this? This is a wonderful Thursday, man.
Yeah, I'm doing good. A lot of sports going on. We got hockey back. You're talking some college football, and obviously tonight, this game I think could be pretty ugly. Ross has given us an ugly weather report, but hey, we've said it a couple times with some potentially ugly games, but they end up being all right for Showdown. So I'm excited to talk about it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a game. It's fun. It's good. We got a Patrick Mahomes on a Thursday night Island game. You get to watch him against the bad defense. That's going to be entertaining, and we get to see. And it's always entertaining to watch Russell play. I don't care what people say. Like even if it's not just for the football, watching Russell Wilson play is just entertaining. Just the goofiness of it all. So it's going to be fun, guys. Get those questions in, so we can talk a little football for you. Answer all your stuff before this game kicks off and locks up. Let's take a look at the inactive list real quick and see if we can take anything from it. I'm looking at the Broncos. Frank Clark is inactive. I didn't even know he still played. Oh, Frank Clark for the Broncos. I was thinking Chiefs. He used to play for the Chiefs. He's inactive. He stinks now. I don't see anybody over there. KC, that doesn't look like anything big. Looks like no real big injuries. But last week, tell me this. I don't know if were you watching the games last week? Were you watching when Kelsey went down?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, that was.
Did that scare you, man? Like I thought, oh my God, he just popped an Achilles, man, right?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. And his reaction was kind of leading me to that too. Like, he slammed the helmet on the ground. It looked like he kind of knew something was wrong. So luckily, it was only a low ankle sprain. It wasn't even a high ankle sprain. I think during the game, one of the reporters came out with a high ankle sprain, which could put him out for a couple of weeks. But that even got even better news as it's a low ankle. So obviously, good outcome based on what we saw on that play.
Yeah, it was something else. So we got. Let me see if I can pull up the line here for the latest line on RotoGrinders for the game. Let me pull it up here. I'm seeing about a 9.5 point spread, about a 46.5 total. What's your initial thoughts on that number right there?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good one. I don't. This Denver offense has looked a little bit better than I think what some people sort of expected. I know there were some people really high on this offense coming into the season with Sean Payton and whatnot, but I think a lot of people were still pretty low on them after what we saw last year. And I think they've been a little bit better than their record and, some of their numbers might actually indicate. Their defense, though, was absolutely horrible. One of, if not the worst defenses in football, which is strange because they were so good last year. So pretty, odd turn of events there for the Denver defense. But I would be pretty surprised if Kansas City doesn't handle this one fairly easily. And I think giving Kansas City 28.5 implied team total makes a lot of sense here. Although Kansas City didn't look great last week or even the week before that either, but obviously they've been dealing with some injuries, and this could be a perfect get right spot for the Chiefs here.
Yeah, it certainly could be. Like, are you? I don't know how to phrase this because they just won a Super Bowl, and so I'm not going to try to disparage what they do, but boy, it seems like at some point they don't give, if they keep not giving Mahomes enough help with wide receivers, like that has to come back and bite them at some point, right? Like I know Kelsey's great, boy, if he were to go down for a longer period of time, just doesn't feel like they're equipped at the wide receiver role to really do very much. What do you make of their wide receiving core?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like their sort of strategy for receivers in the offseason was to get a few guys that have some exciting, potential upside to them and then hope that one or two of them hit. And so far, it hasn't really happened. We've seen Rashee Rice kind of step up into that number one wide receiver role, but again, I don't know if he's like a true alpha receiver or anything like that in the league. But I think a big thing is that we have such a high standard for Kansas City. So that's also something that I think when people, analyze them and look at them, we have such a high standard for them. So, while their offense might be elite, they have some guys who are kind of shaky at the wide receiver position, and we don't really, maybe see them meeting that expectation. So it's a little bit weird. But yeah, to your point, when you have Kelsey, he can kind of make things look a lot better. And the running game's also been good this year as well, with Pacheco leading the way. The running game has been pretty solid here.
What do you think their plan of attack is tonight against this Broncos defense? I mean, they've got Pacheco. I've seen some Clyde Edwards-Helaire love tonight because people think they can run the ball.
Yeah.
Maybe they pass it. What do you think the plan of attack is against such a really bad defense?
I think it's really tough because we've talked about all these receivers here, and they have so many guys that they can spread the ball around to, and that's kind of like their offense just in general. Outside of Kelsey, after that, it's pretty spread around, and I think that they're going to be able to do pretty much whatever they want. I know we talked about the wind a little bit. Roth is saying 30-mile-per-hour sustained winds that might take away some of the deep shots for these guys, but we don't really see a lot of that from Kansas City. Like, that's not really the stuff we get excited about. Obviously, Mahomes can make the throws down the field, but they don't have a lot of guys who are built to go down and make big plays. So I think this sort of environment plays pretty well into the Kansas City hands. But I think from a game script environment and building, around the Chiefs, I really like Pacheco in this one. I think a lot of people also like him, but again, I think they're going to be able to do whatever they want here. So I think, starting with Kelsey, and then after that, they're going to be able to get guys like Rice, Tony, maybe even Sky Moore involved a little bit. So a little worried about that in terms of building lineups. I think it could be a little bit of a headache, if you play Rice and it's Tony that scores, et cetera. You can go down the list. So that's the big question mark for me tonight.
All right, guys, get those questions in so we can answer them before it gets too late. In case you have any last-minute questions for your lineups, I do have a few of them. Grabbed a few from Discord a few minutes ago before I came on and all this other good stuff. King of RR asked earlier in Discord, Dulcich or Gray? Who's your preferred tight end, Kyle?
Yeah, it's gonna be Dulcich for me. I think he's actually a pretty interesting play here, and he's actually the cheaper option. I guess we can talk about those guys, the Denver guys as well, like Dulcich versus Trotman. But Dulcich, we haven't seen much this year. He has 2 targets and 2 catches. But yeah, he was a guy last year who was fantastic for a large portion of it. There were weeks where he was a top 5 tight end, and obviously, been dealing with the injuries. So, and then they brought Trotman in, who was, pretty much based on preseason usage, was the starter. And I guess we'll see how that looks with both of these guys healthy now. But I think Dulcich, his ceiling is way higher than Gray.
Yeah. Let's go. Indy Knoll asks, thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting heavy second half run in a blowout scenario? I think I'm gonna let Kyle answer too, but I would say that my only chip in here is, love picking a game script in Showdown and running with it. Whatever you think it is, it might be wrong, it might be right, but I love the whole theory of picking a game script and running with it. And that's a game script, so I like that. What is your thoughts on Clyde Edwards getting second half run because of a blowout?
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. He's in play, and he also kind of, he has somewhat of a small role as well. Like, if the game is just sort of, average at best, from a game script perspective, he has, I think, 5 targets on the year, so we know that he's going to at least get a few touches. And I know that's not a lot, but from a Showdown perspective, and him only being 1K, he does kind of have a couple of passes. Like, if he breaks off a 20-yard catch or whatever it may be, he can actually get there, even if the blowout doesn't. That narrative doesn't really end up hitting. So, I don't mind that play at all.
All right. Another Discord question. David82165. This is a good one. 2 KC running backs together tonight. You like any lineups where you play both CEH and Pacheco together?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I think, you're kind of working, if you're playing the narrative of the second half blowout, you're kind of hurting yourself there by, building against that Pacheco play. So maybe I wouldn't like that if it were a Pacheco captain or MVP line. I'd probably stay away from that. But again, I think Clyde is so cheap that you can sort of make things happen that way. But you can also make the case for doing it for the Denver side as well. You have Javonte, who's coming back here. I would expect him to not necessarily be at full, but they've kind of been splitting touches as is. And then McLaughlin, he looked good last week, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a few touches. He's very expensive on this slate, But there's a couple of guys that can maybe be super contrarian to where if you have the salary, maybe using two of these Denver guys as well. So I think you can use multiple running backs from both sides and be pretty unique there.
Yeah, I think so. Let's get to some YouTube questions now. Keep firing, guys. We got 23 minutes until this thing kicks off. We're going to answer all your questions as far up to that lock as we can possibly go. Matt D asks, what are the chances of Russ cooking tonight? I mean, this is a good defense, right?
Yeah, Chiefs had a good defense, and I will say Russ has been pretty good. There were some books like looking at his props and stuff. The books don't seem to like him too much, but just in general, like I think Russ, we've seen over the years in these spots where he's a trailing quarterback or behind playing the underdog role, he puts up these big games, and he even did it a couple weeks ago. Obviously, he had the Hail Mary. I want to say that was in the game against Washington, but they were trailing for a portion of that game, and he's able to, just be in a spot where he can have all the production go his way. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens whatsoever. I think he's been a guy who's been able to do that. And the one thing that does concern me is a lot of his, exciting production has come from downfield throws. And the wind might make that a little bit of an issue here, but otherwise, I think Russ Wilson's pretty interesting tonight.
Yeah, I'm seeing something. J3 in chat says odds on producer Steve making a cameo during the show. I'd like to go plus 190. Yeah, I think he'll probably make a cameo at some point. Speaking of Steve, not producer Steve, but I don't know if you were paying attention to Twitter or X, whatever it is, anytime recently, but boy, do yourself a favor and Google Steve Smith, Carolina wide receiver. Boy, he just ripped into Jerry Jeudy good. I don't know if you saw that, but he let him have it on air, man, and it was a good one. That Steve Smith definitely speaks his mind. So, Balance Unlimited asks your favorite MVP on FanDuel, which is a whole different site than DraftKings, totally different construction, salary, setup, and everything. FanDuel, who's your favorite MVP?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to likely go with Travis Kelce and be overweight on him there. I think on FanDuel there's going to be a lot of players in the field using the quarterbacks in the MVP spots, and obviously Pacheco is likely going to be the most popular running back. But I don't think Kelce will be under-owned by any means, but I think he's going to be a guy that I just sort of lean on here. Maybe I'll hope that you get a little bit of an ownership discount because of the injury. I don't think that's likely, but that's sort of at least a chance to where he maybe goes lower owned than these quarterbacks here. But Kelce's going to be my guy tonight.
I would say I will kick my 2 cents in. MVP on FanDuel. If it's a smaller contest, it's tougher to get away from Mahomes, a really small one. If it's much bigger, then I think you're looking at probably a Pacheco for me. It's got to be one of the. I'm not sure I can go with a Bronco. Although Russell Wilson, he's the guy. If I'm going FanDuel MVP and it's not a Chief, it's got to be Russell. And just hope, like, even if you get the right game script, he falls behind and he goes crazy catching up. And he's even capable of running the ball just a little bit when he gets under pressure, maybe get around the goal line and run. So I would definitely say smaller stuff, I'm looking at Mahomes and then slightly Russell Wilson. Bigger stuff, I'd probably change it up and go Pacheco. But that's FanDuel. It's an interesting concept over there. War Machine Racing. Yeah, that's a good question for you, Kyle. Why does Sean Payton hate playing Marvin Mims? I mean, Marvin Mims seems like he's easily the most explosive, one of the best wide receivers, and he just doesn't get enough time here, man.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case that when he's been on the field, which hasn't been a lot, he's been their best player offensively. And I know we haven't seen a lot of them, but it seems like he's consistently making big plays. A couple touchdowns, including that kick return touchdown. I mean, Lil Jordan Humphrey, they cut yesterday, brought him back to the practice squad today, and then called him to the active roster. They've done that with him, I think, like 2 or 3 times now this season alone. So this is the guy they've been okay letting go and then bringing back, and they're still playing him more than Marvin Mims at times. So that's a little bit of a bummer. So I hope that eventually that'll change here. I think tonight it's a little bit difficult to be overly excited about Mims just because of the wind. But again, he's still a guy who can catch a screen pass, and he's so fast and explosive that he can take one to the house. So yeah, I think in terms of looking for an upside play, I like Mims more than some of these Kansas City guys because, when you think about it, Kansas City guys, they're going to have equal issues with volume. So I wouldn't really shy away from Mims tonight because of that.
Now, I know you do a lot of projection stuff for us behind the scenes. Do you have anything to do with the NFL ownership?
Not too much on the ownership side, more so just the point projections. But I see some of the point projections do kind of impact the ownership. So yes and no, I guess would be the answer.
Just a little bit behind the scenes. How much is the Roth saying 30-mile-an-hour wind? How does it affect the ownership projection, or do we even take that into account at all?
So the way that would likely be taken into account outside of like manual adjustments would be just the way that the projections are built in. So for example, when you see guys like Mims who or I guess Valdez Scantling would be a better example to where he's a downfield guy, so his chances of actually reeling in some of his catches are going to be lower. The guys who work on short yard stuff, running backs, tight ends, those guys potentially see better numbers, so their ownership would be potentially spiked a little bit more based on that. So that would be the way that sort of conditions are impacted in the ownership.
Just glancing at the chat, Justin Smith has a question. He says, "Should I watch this game or play Farming Simulator?" I'll tell you, I'm playing Farming Simulator all day long. I'm growing some blueberries. I got some plows. I'm stocking up on plows. I'm going to try to get AJ Dillon in my Farming Simulator. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fun game. I don't know this. Yeah, it may be better than the real game tonight. A few more questions here about the game themselves with 16 minutes left until this thing kicks off. Back-to-back questions from our boy I Love Weed in chat. Our first one is McKinnon or CEH for you? That's a two backup running backs. That's a good question.
Yeah, I'll take CEH just because of the price. At 5.2 for McKinnon, you really need him to score, or not necessarily score, but you need him to have a decent game. But I do think he's pretty touchdown dependent based on his role. So that's why I say you kind of need him to score. But for Clyde, like if he somehow racks up a couple catches, maybe he does get that goal line work, or quite frankly, even if he doesn't do a whole lot, he's 1K, so you can kind of write off that roster slide, and hopefully that extra salary is made up for a lot of points elsewhere. But McKinnon definitely has a higher ceiling, and he has a safer chance to be involved here. But that price, I don't think it's all that great of a price. And at 5K for running back, I think I actually prefer Samaje Perine. So I'll probably stay away from McKinnon tonight, and I'll take Clyde over McKinnon.
And then the second question from Mr. Weed, he has a prop bet. He wants to know what you want, over or under on Russ 217 yards. That's interesting.
Yeah, if I had to pick a side, I would pick the over. We haven't projected for about 224 in the model right now, so I guess I'll lean the over there, but not a huge lean, but I would prefer the over if I was taking a side.
GR Salcedo, gents, would you play Mahomes and Captain naked? I don't even know how you could do that. Almost like that'd be tough to do. He is probably the one quarterback I would think about it and consider, just because of the way he can spread it out. But at some point, if the Mahomes captain is going to get there, somebody's got to get there with him, right?
Yeah, and I guess like for me, when you say naked, like I'm assuming that means no pass catchers, but does that also mean like no Pacheco as well? Because then you're looking at a case where you have Mahomes captain and then what, like Kansas City defense and then all Denver guys. So I think it's really hard to do in Showdown. If you're playing a quarterback in the MVP, I think you almost always want to pair them at least with one or two players. You have one very obvious option in Kelsey, and then you can maybe spread it out with some of these cheaper receivers. So I probably wouldn't recommend that. But to your point, though, if it's I guess more of an optimal type lineup, I still think Kelsey should be in there. But if you are really sold on just Mahomes, he is a guy who can spread it around and maybe not necessarily be a guy who you regret doing that with.
All right. We got about 14 minutes left. Somewhere around, I'd say roughly the 10-minute mark. We'll get to the Plums play of the night from each one of us. We'll give you our best player, our favorite player of the night. That's a shout out to Butthole Jenkins, who just joined the chat. He likes to fill it in the Plums play of the night. Let's get some more questions here. J3, any under 1K guys worth targeting. I'll let you look at it for a minute. For me, under 1K, well, Clyde Edwards is right there on the border at 1K. I think he's interesting. I think under 1K, there's not a lot. But the one guy that I do find somewhat interesting is Justin Ross. He got on the field, man. He's got a good pedigree from college. He just suffered a really catastrophic injury when he was in his last year, and that kind of took him out of all the conversations. There's talent there. There's obviously not a lot of competition out here at wide receiver. Like, there's some just not good wide receivers with Kansas City. Nobody stands out, is what I should say, at the wide receiver position. I think Justin Ross got his beak wet last week. I think maybe we see it. Hopefully we see a little more. That's for $600. That would be my guy. But do you see anybody under 1K you could deal with?
Yeah, it'd be the same guy, Ross. I think that there's a real case to think that Ross is sort of following the same path that we saw with Rashee Rice, where they kind of eased him in, and then we saw him get going a little bit and be more involved, and then now it's been a little bit more consistent. Ross is, I would say definitely better than some of these guys that we have on the field a lot for Kansas City. Guys like Justin Watson, Marcus Valdez-Scantling. I don't think that they're all that great. So I think Ross has the ability to overstep these guys, and we saw him get 4 targets last week. So I think this could be an interesting spot to see his role sort of grow here, and only $600.
Yeah, Marisha Keaton, single entry on FanDuel. Who would be your one Bronco? I'm guessing they got a 4-1 build running, and they want one Bronco. Single entry kind of tells me I still want to play it a little bit safe. I don't have to go too far off the reservation. Still think on FanDuel, where there's no salary cap implications and all that other, I still think it's Russell Wilson. But who's your favorite Bronco if you're running a 4-1 build on FanDuel?
Yeah, it'd be the same. It'd be Russ. I think if you want to be a little bit different, there you have a couple other guys, but I think Russ is probably the safer option. And, if you did want to get a little contrarian, I would probably look at Judy or Javonte Williams, but I think Russ is the obvious option there.
All right, got some more questions here for Dave Jones. What are you guys what are our takes on running backs, Chiefs running backs, and captain on DraftKings? I like it. If the rest of your team fits that build and it's a particular game script, roll with it. I'm good with that. What about you?
Yep, I like it as well, especially Pacheco. I think he's a really strong captain play tonight, and I wouldn't even shy away from Pacheco in the captain spot or the MVP spot, and then more Chiefs passing options like Mahomes, Kelsey. Like, I wouldn't shy away from that just because we should be expecting the majority of the scoring production to come from Kansas City with that 28.5 implied team total, and Pacheco has a lot of touchdown equity here on this team, so I wouldn't shy away from that either.
All right, we get to another question here. Barry Pullman, best long shot wide receiver for KC in a GPP, Watson or Justin Ross? What do you got there, Watson or Ross? Long shot, big GPP.
Yeah, it's going to be Ross for me. I think he's just a little bit more of a higher upside play, and then the price tag helps as well.
All right, we got about 10 minutes. I want to give out our Plums play of the night before it gets too late, just in case anybody does want to alter their lineup, and then so we leave them with plenty of time there. So I'm going to start off with you. I'm going to let you take the floor first here. Who's your fill it in your Plums play of the night?
It's been a common trend for me going with tight ends on this show for Thursday night, and I think Kelsey's probably my favorite captain option of the night, but I'm going to go with something a little bit contrarian, a little bit different for this play. I'm going to go with Marvin Mims. He's only 4.6 on DraftKings. I think that there's going to be a lot of builds that I'm toying with that are, predominantly Chiefs centered. So you're going to have 4 Chiefs, maybe even 5. And I think if you're doing that, Mims is a perfect guy for those sorts of builds just because of the fact that he could, have a monster game on just 1 or 2 plays. So I'm going to go with Mims here in this one at just 4.6 on DraftKings.
Okay, I like that. I like that long shot. And I don't want to go too obvious. There's some really obvious people out here tonight. I don't want to go too obvious, so I'll go slightly off the radar just a little bit, and cross my fingers and hope it hits. But considering the weather, and I want a mutter in the weather. I don't necessarily want the speed guys and the small guys. I want the big physical guys. I'm going to say Cortland Sutton. I'm gonna go Cortland Sutton. I think he's got a good connection with Russ. Just a lot of times it just doesn't come through. But we're on national TV. A lot of pride going on here. I think Russ. I think I've already said. I think the Broncos come out and play fairly well. I think that Russell pushes it, and Sutton, bad weather. I don't think it matters. He's a big target, so I'm gonna go Cortland Sutton on that one. All right, we got about 8 minutes left. Let's keep on with some questions here. Rip and sip. What are we doing with kickers? Oh, but the wind is up. The wind is blowing around. Kyle, what do we do with kickers? You can answer this one because I got Harrison Butker in my season long. I need to know if I should bench his ass or not.
Yeah, I actually just pulled Butker out of my season long lineup as well, and picked up a quarterback or a tight or kicker. Sorry, from the waivers there. I'm staying away from the kickers tonight. The wind, no, thank you. I think this could easily be a spot where maybe we even see teams go for it on fourth down a little bit more, just because of the fact that the wind is going to be a little bit crazy, and the further away you get, the less likely you are. And then especially for Butker, like this could be a spot where he's kicking 4 extra points and then calling it a day. So yeah, I'd probably be staying away from kickers tonight.
Man, it's interesting. I don't know what I'm going to do. I only got 7 minutes to decide, so I got to figure it out. Let me get a couple real quick season-long questions. This is fun stuff. Chris Munoz says, with the return of Cooper Kupp, do you think Nakua's targets are going down?
I mean, in the first week with Kupp, they did not really. I mean, I just think it's obviously you're never going to see him have those 21 targets like he did in week 2 or whatever it was. So I think naturally the answer is yes, but I think he's definitely still active and involved in the offense and enough to be a fantasy starter. So yeah.
And one more season long. Is Kyler Murray out for the season? And if not, what are the chances of the Cardinals trade him? I don't think he's out for the season, but I don't know if we see him very much. Would they trade him? I would say I wouldn't imagine they trade him, but I guess if they got a good offer, they could. They do have a couple of nice first round draft picks this year. Maybe they'll chase after another quarterback, but I don't see him. I don't think they'll get the value for him that they really want. Big Hurt's got a couple questions here for us. FanDuel single entry favorite MVP, and then in GPP your favorite MVP. You take GPP. What's your favorite large field GPP on FanDuel?
Yeah, so for large field, I think I'm just going to go with Javonte Williams and hope that he finds the end zone a couple times and is unique in that way. I think obviously the 2 quarterbacks, Kelsey and Pacheco, are all going to be very, very popular. So I think just starting differently at the MVP spot on FanDuel could be pretty unique. And I do think that some people, might even just ignore or write off Javonte coming back from the injury and considering he's already been limited. But yeah, I'll take a stab there.
In the single entry, I'd say I still think Mahomes is going to be so highly owned on FanDuel. Maybe we get away from that, even though it's single entry. Maybe go Russell Wilson. There's like zero reason why Russell Wilson can't fall behind in this game and outperform Patrick Mahomes just based on garbage time alone. So I'd go Russell Wilson single entry over there just to be a little bit different. All right. Producer Steve says, do you think Jerry Jeudy is motivated after what Steve Smith said? No, I don't. Jeudy just might not be a guy that you can motivate. Actually, I would say I would rather have Steve Smith suit up and run routes than Jerry Jeudy. I think Steve Smith could outperform him. I got one for you, Kyle. Is $5,600 too much for a defense on DraftKings? And then I'll follow that up with you. Does the weather make you really like these defenses even more tonight?
You can't get me to play the Broncos defense, but I guess the weather would make me like the Chiefs D a little bit more. 5.6 is a pretty steep price to pay, but I think especially if you're building around, like if you have Pacheco and the captain, and you're building around maybe a little bit more of a uglier game script, I do think it makes sense.
All right, we got a couple more here. We got about 4 minutes. We'll get a couple more questions. Do you guys, this is Barry Pullman, do you guys actively avoid close to the max salaries in large field lineups? I think when using a lineup optimizer, you can set that thing at a certain price tag, not to exceed it, so you make sure. It's just one way to be slightly different. If you are getting close to the max, you are having duplicate lineups. There's almost no way around that, right?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend setting a max at least a couple $100, but you can even be really aggressive and do more on showdown slates. But yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that.
AK Boy, DK, GPP, which Broncos tight end. Kyle's already made it a pretty big point. Dulcich is his guy tonight. I guess, man, about 3 minutes left. We've given out the plays. I don't see any more questions. I think we can jump out of here. You got any last advice for anybody on this slate with the weather and the way things are trending right now? What's your last piece of advice for the people, Kyle, before we jump out of here?
Yeah, I guess, we've talked about the weather a lot and I've talked about it a lot, but like I still, don't necessarily be afraid of something just because of the weather, especially, on a showdown slate. You can play a guy in I guess have him get there or succeed based on things, outside of the weather. And that could be even helping you from a unique standpoint. So that's the one thing that I would recommend about the weather.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate all the questions. You made this thing fly by. You got about 2 minutes to get your last edits in and get your lineups in and watch a fun game and pay attention to all the good sports tonight. This kicks it off for the weekend. This is going to be fun stuff. For Kyle Murray, I was your host, Head Chopper, on the Pre-Lock Show. We'll be back on Monday night. Until then, good luck in those GPPs, and we're out of here.